Up to this point in the chapter, we have managed to create a fairly decent looking GI solution that, although still needing improvement, certainly looks better than the one that we started out with. Another aspect of visualization projects that can drastically affect our lighting though, and one that we now want to take a closer look at, would be materials and textures in the scene. Indeed, as already noted, the lighting solution that we have produced up to this point has been created using just a plain grey material applied to everything in the scene. Given that this also has a fairly light base color, and that the color value is constant across all of the meshes in the scene, our light has been carrying quite a high energy value, and so bouncing around the environment pretty easily. Now, I'm not wanting to add textures to our objects just yet, as these can make it difficult for us to accurately gauge the quality of GI that we are producing, especially so when it comes time to really fine-tuning things. Better at this point for us to get things looking good without textures, and then once we are happy with the lighting, go ahead and add materials and texture maps into the scene. What we need right now then is a way to get a better idea of just how much light will eventually be bouncing around the environment once the texturing has been done, which we can do by applying a variety of grayscale values to our objects that will either mimic or at least come close to the values that will be used in the final texture maps. Although, if we are working under some fairly tight time constraints, then even a rough approximation can still help us out quite a bit. To show what I mean, let's load the 01_07B level, make sure that we are in game mode, and then take a look at what we have, which, when compared to the previous scene, shows a noticeable change in the lighting solution. Now, we do need to note here that only the materials are different in the two scenes. Both the GI quality and light intensities are identical, meaning we can now adjust our lighting setup using this more accurate representation of how our scene will eventually behave in terms of light bounce. In this instance, let's alter the intensity of the directional light by coming to its controls, and then setting the intensity value, found in the Details tab, to around about 7.5. We can also increase both GI bounce settings by 1 in order to make use of the extra intensity, after which we can rebake our lighting solution. Not that we are done looking at the impact materials will have on our GI setup just yet. As you may have already noticed here, the grayscale values that I have used on the materials all sit within a fairly small value range. The question then is, why might this typically be a good thing to do? Well, during the light baking process, the base color of a material will directly affect how the lighting solution ends up looking. High contrast and/or dark base colors can actually make it difficult for light to bounce, with the good news being that the opposite is also true, in that low contrast or mid-range colors can make it easier to move light around an environment. In fact, a tool that can really help us see how we are doing in this department is the unlit mode of our Unreal viewport. Looking in the Unreal documentation, we have two images that can help us see the kind of difference that textures can make to GI lighting. Notice that the scene on the first image looks quite flat, and in some areas it is quite difficult to see any separation at all between the different static meshes found there. But whilst our artistic side may be telling us that things look horrible here, we really need to fight the urge to change things, because this flat look means that it will in fact be the lighting in the level that does all of the hard work in regard to making textures and the overall scene look good, which really is how we want things to be, rather than doing things the old-fashioned way and artificially building separation and so shading into our base color or diffuse maps. A rule of thumb that we can use to help us get good lighting in a level then is that things should always look fairly flat and boring when viewed through the unlit viewport mode in Unreal. As we say, baking lighting and shadow information into the base color maps will ultimately only counteract the hard work that we are currently doing in setting up the lighting and GI solutions in a proper way. Now that we have an idea of how textures and materials will affect our scene then, time to move on to our next exercise and take a look at how we can use light portals to pull a little more quality out of our global illumination for an interior visualization.